Welcome to the Book of Urm, Tales of Piecora, the Haunted Fortress. Chapter 12, Plans Within Plans. Plans within plans. Time became a blur for Ravsese within the subterranean Callistico mansion, which the steel dragon Eindonjivangshun had made into his lair. He welcomed them into his sprawling home by offering them a taste of his own lifestyle hidden beneath the city of Alagost, the seat of power in Canonia. He gave them a personal tour of the entire labyrinthian complex, which included many places they had already visited, but this time with added commentary and trivia provided by Eindon. Servants made themselves known and plentiful, and always there were several hovering around wherever they went. When Ravsese asked where they all were when they were wandering through the mansion without Eindon, he simply said, "They are good at hiding when I'm not around, and that is intentional." Ravsese lost count of how many servants worked in Callistico mansion for Eindon. Maybe it was somewhere in the hundreds. She never saw the same person twice. They rarely spoke, and they moved with great speed, agility, and efficiency. Strangely, at the same time the servants made themselves prevalent, so too did the rats. Rats were everywhere they went, and to Ravsese's astonishment nobody seemed to mind. Well, nobody except for herself and Valesh, who were both repulsed by them. But Autor grew fond of the rats, and even fonder for the servants for that matter, and they seemed to like him too. Both servants and rats went out of their way to pay Autor special attention and cater to his every need. Ravsese almost began to feel left behind, but she let everything unfold around her without making a fuss, as it gave her joy to see her son appear happy and communicative, with Eindon's strange little fellowship of rats and servants down here, so far below the city. They slept in whatever beds they desired, and ate whatever and whenever they felt like it. Food, clothing, bedding, bathing and self-care were all provided luxuriously by Eindon's large community of servants. There seemed to be no end to the specialization among the servants, as if they were all highly trained from every school of service across the world. To Ravsese's surprise, she encountered servants who knew certain arts and skills found only in Muth, like particular food recipes, massage treatments, hairstyles and clothing. She found others who were skilled in Brenzage toy-making, and she had one fashion a gift for Autor, a brand-new rat-catcher toy as his old one was destroyed recently. But he wasn't the only one who received such a gift, for the same toy-maker also gave her a delicate silver and pearl bracelet with a small disc covered by a glass lens, and beneath the lens were numbers arranged in a circle. Two tiny pointers from the middle of the disc moved slowly around the circle, always aimed at the numbers around the outside. When Ravsese asked what the little invention was for, the small man simply said, "Time," and spoke no further. During one conversation, when they were all gathered during a feast around a long table in a hall they hadn't visited before, Piecora brought up the frozen corpse in the freezer in one of the mansion's kitchens. Without looking up from his dish of broiled glazed hen and cherry tomatoes, Eindon replied, "He was my representative. He made the mistake of using my real name on a contract when I sent him to Coast Haven. I think it was for someone's home that they wanted to turn into a museum. I sent some money down with him and—" He looked up suddenly, as if reliving a painful memory. "And it's a ground rule around here that no one use my full name. Not here, and especially not up there. The price for breaking this rule is death." He then shrugged his shoulders and said, "I'm a man of my word. Frankly, I forgot he was in there. We'll have to cook him before he goes bad." Ravsese lost her appetite for the rest of that evening and the next day after hearing Eindon's lurid tale. During their surreal time in Domusithrae Entia Flusthumai, home of the harp and wave, Ravsese learned several other interesting things that she would have never discovered on her own had she stayed in Muth. For one, she learned about the fall of the Callistico family and Eindon's involvement. Apparently, long ago after the fortress was built, the family became splintered between those who welcomed the association and relations with the humans of Canania, and those who wished to retain their devilkin heritage and return to what they called the old ways. They were compelled to expand their quarters deeper beneath the mansion. Texts and sections of parchments exist that describe Callistico family members ravenously digging with tools, utensils, and even their hands, and complaining that something called to them in their dreams from deep beneath the mansion. Finally, they discovered the frozen portal to the 8th realm of the 9 hells, among the buried ruins of Nalapizausu, perhaps even its capital city Vagar Nakathla. The portal was a forgotten vestige from the Nalupizausu Empire that survived the cataclysm, belonging to a powerful house during those ancient times. Around this discovery, the outcasts of House Callistico poured their wealth as they cavorted with the devils of Mephistopheles, the lord of Panyalivanu, the desolation of Rhyme, 8th realm of the 9 hells. Generations went by as devils and devilkin began to slowly enter the world, infiltrating Canania's deep subterranean cave systems and ancient ruins of Nalupizausu, until they caught the attention of Quiacudius Untai Nanua, or those who watch the door. The Quia sent Eindonjevangshun from a line of dragons who perfected the art and making of steel, and who evolved their scales to be of pure steel as reinforced armour against the devil hordes of Nalupizausu. He was born in lands that would become the Muthan Peninsula after the cataclysm. His line was close with the human houses who already lived in those parts ere the cataclysm, and they understood the ways and mannerisms of humans better than any other dragon line of Aquala. It was even said that they taught the art of steel to these wealthy human houses of Aquala from their own organic processes, and that this ancient practice survived the cataclysm within the smiths who sailed with Cannoneer across the Salt Sea and established the country that would be named after their leader, Cannoneer Buren Macanon. Eindonjevangshun came to the Callistico family and immediately dealt with the festering evil beneath the fortress. In a single night, all of the outcasts were slain, as well as any devilkin and devils that didn't escape through the ice portal to Panyalivanu. During that night, the fighting beneath the mansion grew so fierce that it caused the entire structure to collapse, and any Callistico family members caught in the destruction perished. Only those who were away from the mansion survived. When they returned and saw their home in ruins and their wealth gone from their coffers, they dispersed throughout Cannoneer as paupers and beggars, destitute in their confusion and trauma with no help from Eindonjevangshun. For he could not share with anyone what truly happened beneath the mansion, nor his role in guarding the portal and protecting the city, not even his own true identity. So he remained silent and watched the surviving Callistico family fade into nothing, despite knowing and following to this day every single family member by name, including Valesh. Eindonjevangshun could not destroy the portal itself, as it was ancient even by his measure, and not made by any hands from the primal realm, and he lacked the power to close it completely. Instead, he devised a plan to remain within the fallen mansion and make it his lair. He vowed to watch over the portal and guard it with his life against anything that might emerge from the other side, as was the responsibility of all dragons within the secret society of Quiacudius Untai Nanua. He created the wealthy socialite persona, Eindon Vandus, to navigate effortlessly through Cannonian society, and declared himself as founder and regent of the Callistico Family Trust. Through this endeavour, he conducted himself mysteriously within the political and social machinations of Alagostan's civic society, always involving himself with altruistic efforts if they also served his own interests, like purchasing the deed to Museus Antiquatum Endium, or Endium Museum of Antiquities in Coast Haven. Occasionally he might send money to one among the Callistico line, but only in such a way that could never be traced back to him. This he only did very rarely, for he feared exposure above all. Valesh remarked that by and large, Cannonians do not know their own origins, as they claim that Cannoneer was a man who led a fleet of ships from somewhere beyond the Salt Sea, and so they were called the Southrons, as they had no identity of their own before establishing Cannonia. "They are not far from the truth, young Valesh," said Eindon. "Before the salt sea it was all dry land for as far as the eye could see. There was Aquala and Nalupizausu, and the great war between the two. Teofuén ended the war by destroying everything, and the crater that was left by her ritual was filled in by the great South Seas. This became the Salt Sea, and sometime soon after came the ships of Canonia, who alone among the humans of Aquala survived the cataclysm. Where exactly did they come from? No one knows, but we think they must have been forewarned, to have ships preemptively built to withstand the waves and tumults of the cataclysm and be far enough away to survive it. We too were all but destroyed, and of the great houses of Nalupizausu, only the ones in the lands that are now Muth survived. These were the pure houses of Nalupizausu, the ones that retained their humanity and did not mingle with devils. All the houses that did ally with the hells were destroyed. "Why do you not share this with the people of Canonia?" Valesh asked, almost shouting the question at him. "You know everything about us. Would it not help us to know of our own past? To know who we really are?" "I've tried, young Valesh," said Eindon. "I've even petitioned the seat of power, here in Alagost. I said, let it be required to be taught in schools, include it in the doctrines inside all temples. Finance research into delving beneath these lands to discover the secrets and ruins that lie hidden here, deciphering ancient manuscripts and learning the ancient tongues of both Aquala and Nalupizausu. Uncover lost arts and secrets that remain hidden from us, beneath our very feet, and realize the wonders that came before us. Let us turn around and face the true past of our country, including the sins of our ancestors, and learn from them." But alas, Canonians prefer their own conspiracies and mythologies to sell books and songs, even if the truth is far stranger than the fictions they devise. They'd rather sing hymns of a man they only know by name, and naught else, except what the public fancies any given year. Same thing is true with your ancient hero, Rodin Halfelven. Canonians will never learn or know anything, so long as they are more committed to the relativity of fiction than truth itself. You know this to be true, Valesh." Valesh looked back at her plate and said unexpectedly, "I wanted to kill you once. In fact, I devoted my life to it. I got the hostess job at the Bishop's Lament without pay, only to watch you, follow you, and devise a time and place when you would never see another sunrise. I recruited the knives to help me. In fact, I retained Ashovai, the Heroless herself. But now that I know the truth about you, and the truth behind the disgrace of my family, I am glad I didn't follow through with it. I am now ashamed of it." Ravsesa held her breath as Eindon sat back and wiped his goatee with his satin napkin. Immediately a servant, slight in size and stature, removed his plate, and another refilled his wine-glass. After thinking for several moments, Eindon said, "I know Valesh." Valesh looked up at him and said, "How do you know? Who spoke to you? Why haven't you killed me yet? Why did you allow me to continue with my plan, if you knew all along?" "Because I'm leaving all of this to you," Eindon said. Even the servants stopped in their tracks, and all eyes converged on Eindon. Ravsese discovered she was still holding her breath. Valesh dropped her utensil and it clanged loudly on her porcelain plate. What? "I don't understand. I blamed you for everything my entire life. No matter what your intentions were, your mission or your secret society or whatever, the results were the same. My family suffered and I blamed you for that. All I wanted was to take this from you. I wanted you dead so I could reclaim my family's fortune and honor. You can't just give it to me. It's already mine. All of this, it belongs to the Callistico. You feckless lizard." Eindon whipped his napkin at her, and it landed squarely in her face, stifling her outburst. "Recoil your tongue, child. It is time to begin thinking as an adult, wouldn't you say?" Eindon boomed, while standing abruptly from his chair. I know what your plans are. I watch every single member of your family cast across the country living in squalor. I helped only when I was allowed, when I could get away with it. Think for a moment, child, before you raise another word. Have you not wondered about it? When a doctor appeared at your mother's door when she was ill, or when a purse of Alagostan minted coins just so happened to appear on a barrel as you were passing by. I have an entire team committed to the overwatch of the remaining Callistico family, but I must do it in secret. Think of the times you missed my help because you weren't looking or didn't know what to look for. Think of the times you were too self-piteous to accept the help of a stranger. Gods, who got you into the bishop's lament in the first place? You think Ashavai took pity on a street urchin and decided to make her a hostess in one of the most expensive elite establishments in the whole country? Do you even know who Ashavai really is? She is an elf for starters, so right away that should give you a clue that she is more than she seems. But she is a Shava elf from Kalonvaloth, the roots under the mountain, the very same elves who wrote themselves out of Canonian history after aiding in the construction of Durinlad and then regretting it. She is ancient. She's been around since your Southrons arrived in their ships. And she knows who I am. So yes, she gave you the job at the lament, but only because I knew your ambitions, and I wanted you close to me. I've known for a long time that you would be the one to take over all of this, but only after the frozen portal was destroyed. He then cast his eyes on Aurtor and said, and now that has happened. Praise be to Belmaugri for blessing this poor child who bears more conflict within himself than all of us together. The way to Panyalivanu, the desolation of rhyme, is now shut, and I am finally free from the burden of guarding it. He reached all the way across the table, knocking over glasses of wine and upending plates of food, to retrieve his napkin back from Valesh's plate, and said to her quietly, Now all of this is yours, Valesh. It was always yours, as you've always said, but I had to do what I had to do. You cannot fill me with more guilt over your family than I've already filled myself. Now, we must set upon the next phase of all this, the one I've always dreamt of, as you have as well, re-establishing the Callistico to their former and rightful place in Canonian society. Valesh's face was wet with streaming tears, her lips quivered, and her breathing came rapidly as she withstood Eindon's loud lecture. And once again, Ravsesi saw Valesh's usual tough, scrappy, mature countenance quickly reduced to her young teen years. Orta hopped down from his perch of bundled blankets on his chair and walked behind Ravsesi to stand behind Valesh. He folded his arms around her, looked up at Eindon and said, Don't yell at her again! Like a burst of sun hitting a mound of snow, Eindon withered and melted beneath the child's polite but firm rebuke, and he sat back down in his chair heavily with an audible huff. Ravsesi finally exhaled, and then inhaled immediately after. She looked around the table and found Piecora staring at her intensely. Something about the way Piecora was looking at her gave Ravsesi a sudden rise of confidence, or perhaps it ignited the need to speak up and offer some resolution to the conversation. She stood up from her chair and said, We all are dealing with pain that is our own, and sometimes it overlaps. It is good to address these moments, get them out and not let them fester and cause harm. We have learned a lot about you, Eindon, and this place, this country, and a little bit about the world, since falling down here. At first we sought you only for your money so that we could leave this country, but now you are a friend. We are placing our trust in you to help us, just as you trust us to honour your privacy and keep your identity, as well as all of this, hidden from society. And now that my son has closed this access, this door to hell, it seems there is much to be done for Valesh's family. I pray to the winds there are no more harsh words between you two. We are already dealing with so much. She sat back down in her chair and fidgeted with the signet ring of Tiafuan stuck on her finger. Eindon gulped the rest of his wine down, and placing it loudly on the table, he said, "Valesh, I'd like you to represent me in my affairs on the surface. I need a replacement, as you now know. I'd like you to do it. You know more about me and this place than my previous representative ever did. Don't worry, your life isn't in danger. You're a Callistico. I'm sworn to protect you. I'll not just leave this place and let you deal with all of this alone. There will be a transition, and you will have all my resources at your disposal. We need to notify each family member and think about rebuilding. I do have one request, though. Wherever you decide to build the next mansion, or if there is one at all, let it not be here. I'll need to stay for a while, years perhaps, to keep an eye on this place, as the veil between worlds is still very thin and delicate down below. I'll remain vigilant until we are certain I am not needed anymore." Valesh, having regained her composure, nodded her head and ate more of her food. With her mouth full, she said, "I think we should set up a meeting with the family, at some location other than here. Somewhere neutral, easy to get to, but secure. I also think we should send them money first, so they can get back on their feet at least before agreeing to come to this meeting." "That sounds like a fine start, Valesh," said Eindon. "It will take some time for the pieces to fall into place. Do you agree, then, to be my representative? I just need someone I can trust to be my eyes and ears for my other transactions. It's not good for me to go dormant for over long. I'm involved in too many things." "I can do that," said Valesh, nodding again. Ravsez had learned one other thing while staying in Demusithre Entia Flus Thumai, and it happened one quiet time when she and Aortor were seated in an especially large, padded leather double chair covered in thick blankets. A single lamp was lit on the side table, and both Ravses and Aortor were huddled together, staring at the blank parchment that they removed from the wall above the desk in the room just before the Nalupizausu ruins, and the chamber containing the frozen portal where they met Eindon in his true form for the first time. Piecora was seated in a chair opposite from them, the chair's back firmly against a wall, watching Ravses and her son as their eyes glowed mysteriously as they gazed over the blank parchment. In one hand, Ravses held the chunk of Muthan Blackrock. 3 servants had just left after refilling their glasses with water. They seemed unfazed by the Unscavian's glowing eyes. Eindon and Valesh were passing by while discussing certain monetary distributions across the river when Eindon stopped in his tracks and stared at Ravsese and Aortor. "Yes, their eyes glow when they look at this paper and that stone when light is held close to their faces," Piecora remarked unemotionally. "We're used to it by now." "It is the fiendish sight," said Eindon as he strode into the room. He lifted the lamp from the table and knelt beside Ravsese and Aortor, holding the lamp near their faces as they beheld the parchment. "I should not be surprised, but I have never seen it for myself in all of my years," he said softly in amazement. "This is known as Pitsauchikernkel in the language of the Deva, the eyes of Mephistopheles in the Low Canonian common tongue, or the fiendish sight. When one has this trait, they may see the works of hell that may otherwise go unnoticed from mundane sight. Note their eyes, how they enlarge to receive light as I move the lamp, the infernal light from beyond the known spectrum, the light of fiends and devils. Not all Unscavia have this trait, but you both do, confirming the belief that the trait is linked to the line of Tiafuen, the sorceress summoner, empress of Nalupizausu, who served Mephistopheles. House Pizauskul, the line of Tiafuen, devised many wondrous and strange methods of secrecy during the war. Among them was thought to be the fiendish sight, which Tiafuen created within her own progeny, and those within her house, and their children. These people could see hidden messages on walls, or the floor, or on paper, or even hidden tattoos that were invisible to everyone else. However, Tiafuen never perfected this art, and it was never guaranteed that someone would be born with the fiendish sight. So the moonstones were created. These stones would allow everyone, eyes of Mephistopheles or not, to see and read messages hidden from the rest of the world. But the moonstones required more work. Tell me, was I right? Is the black rock a moonstone? And is there anything on this blank parchment? I came by these things a long time ago, and I've had my theories. Ravses raised the Muthan black rock to the light, as her eyes reflected brightly shifting shades of amber and red like two glowing discs within her pupils, and said, "My son and I both see a red gem, and no black rock. As my fingers cannot touch the red gem, this tells me it is a moonstone, for no one else can see it but us. But I have never learned or heard of this Piecora before. I've never met anyone with the fiendish sight before." She then raised the parchment to the lamp, and with her dazzling reflecting eyes she read aloud the script written in the margins surrounding the edges of the paper. "Hidden is the way for seekers of sojourn, except by the moonlight that shines through the stones. 3 moons for 3 paths, and the stones that were torn. When 3 moons united, a new life was born." There is a mark here at the end of the last line indicating there is more to this song, meaning this isn't the end of it, said Inden excitedly, finishing Ravses's sentence. "There's more to it, which means there must be more," Piecora finished his sentence. "Why do I feel like I've been here before?" she asked herself as no one was listening. Inden hopped to his feet and said, "I was right. The lost sojourn. It is a map after all. I found it here when I took over, along with the black rock. They were together, wrapped carefully inside a locked chest. Oh, I knew the Harfunveil came here for a reason. It makes me wonder, what if they continued sailing up the river? What if the lost sojourn went into the northern mountains of Ereth Andul? Were they on the right track, or had they given up?" Ravses said, "I don't know, but I hope you don't mind that we took it." "I don't know, it's not mind," said Inden. Then he looked at Valesh and said, "Do you mind, Valesh?" "It belongs to you." Valesh sighed and said, "Unless we can make money from it, I don't mind at all. And I don't see anything valuable there unless you offered it to an artist to draw all over the paper with the black rock. Then maybe the art might be worth something if we put it in an expensive frame at least." "See that? You're perfect for the job," Inden said to Valesh admiringly. Without further discussion about maps and moonstones, Valesh launched into a plan she had been mulling over that consisted of selling the fallen steel scales shed by Inden to generate some immediate profit while working on the more long-term plans that would take longer to initiate, like reuniting the Callistico family. And Inden listened with keen interest. Ravsese, Piecora, Valesh and Artor spent what felt like weeks within the hospitality of Inden and his servants, deep underground inside sunken Domusithre Entia Flus Thumai, home of the harp and wave, and lair of Inden Jevangshun. They all grew closer to each other during this time. Specifically, Aortor and Valesh developed a special bond between each other, and Piecora and Ravsese also became close friends. Aortor and Valesh played like children in the many pools of the mansion, and afterward they sat and played chess while drying in their towels. They would look at each other and laugh uncontrollably at secrets only they were privy to, and Ravses's heart would melt while watching them from across a corridor. They wandered into kitchens, while servants cooked the day's meals and poked their fingers into dough, licked icing from spatulas, and generally tried to annoy the servants to elicit a reaction, usually to no avail. The servants, it seemed, had infinite amounts of patience, and sometimes 1 or 2 of them would even partake in the children's mischief, or give it right back to them. They spoke very little Low Canonian, and the children would mock their broken accents. More often than not, the servants didn't seem to mind, and sometimes they mocked the children back playfully. Ravses never did find out where the servants were from, except that they all seemed to have the same origins. In fact, she wondered if they were all in the same family, as they seemed very close to each other. Ravsese and Piecora spent time sharing their lives with each other. Ravsesa learned about the nature of Piecora and her relationship with Hiero, and she learned about Xianjian's society and the hermit they worship as their oracle. Piecora shared her adventures of the wildlands with her, and especially her recent tale involving Cynthia, Kiahala, and the undying lands of the Eldar. Ravsesi could hardly believe her stories, and wondered if she could ever survive or even function in such experiences. Piecora would just look at her and smile, saying, "We're going to find out what you're made of, Ravsesa." That's what the wildlands do. They expose you to who you really are, and you either survive or die. Ravses wondered if this was considered reassurance among Xianjians. Piecora also showed Ravses some basics in fighting and survival, declaring that the more Ravses knew, the easier it would be for Piecora to keep her and her son alive in the wildlands. Ravses grew to trust Piecora with her life, as well as her son's. She became family, the only one she had. All four of them looked to Eindon as their wealthy, overly and aggressively civilized, and often outlandishly ridiculous benefactor. Ravses often wondered if his robust personality were real, or if it were a contrivance from living among humans for so long. It was as if he had adopted all of humankind's traits, good and bad, and then exaggerated every single one of them. Everything was a performance with him. Only a dragon would have this kind of energy all the time, she mused to herself. "What know you of Ediotor, Piecora?" asked Eindon one morning over breakfast. The notion of mourning had become a barely recognised institutional abstraction that occurred after being awake long enough to finally submit to long hours of sleep, and this repetition passed as the morning and night cycle after being so far underground for so long. Piecora looked surprised by the question, then said, "It is a large fortified ruin in the middle of the wildlands, equally distant between Xienja and Canonia, regardless of how the surrounding lands are shifting. It is always in the middle at all times. I both look for it and avoid it when I travel there." "Why is that?" asked Eindon. "I look for it because it is a landmark I use that tells me we are halfway to our destination, and I avoid it because it is haunted with madness." "Never look to a Xienjian to get anything other than the most succinct answer to any question. No more, no less," said Eindon light-heartedly. "I love the Xienjians for that. I shall have to visit them one day, if the hermit would allow for that." "The hermit does not allow or disallow your visit, Eindon," Piecora said testily. "He has no hold over us. Come and go as you like." Eindon let out a laugh and said, "Ha! You and I know better than that, Piecora, but that is for another conversation. Tell me, what do you know about Ediotor's history?" Piecora took a bite from a Xianjian egg dish that the cooks made specifically for her, and said, "It was built by Xianjian and Canonian hands to represent their alliance, collaboration, and friendship. There is a town nearby, Kiodaneth, that is between Xienja and Ediotor, composed of descendants of those who built and occupied the keep, a mixture of both Xianjian and Canonian bloodlines." "Have you been there?" asked Eindon. "No, I have never been inside Ediotor for obvious reasons," said Piecora. "But sometimes I stay in Kiodaneth. I've considered retiring there. I like the people." Ravsese was mildly surprised by Piecora's answer. Up until now, she didn't think Piecora liked anyone, including her own country. Ravsese felt that she inhabited a special place within Piecora that perhaps only a few others had been allowed to enter, since getting to know each other after that fateful day when she and her son entered the knife's edge, seemingly so long ago. So, to imagine a whole town where Piecora liked the people was something that Ravses became highly interested in, and she wanted to learn more. "Why do you say Ediotor is haunted by madness?" asked Eindon. "Because it is," said Piecora. "I've seen it myself. People who wander too near to its broken walls succumb to maddening voices inside their minds and are driven inside its walls never to be seen again. I've heard them myself when I saved a child from there." She had wandered off from Kiodaneth and no one would go looking for her, for fear that she was already lost to Ediotor. But I caught her just before she entered. I heard the madness inside me, all speaking at once, all beckoning me to enter the ruined keep. But I persevered, and staggered away with what little strength I had. I was nearly witless by the time I was found by several guardsmen from the town, but I was just happy that the little girl was safe. "A beautiful tale, Piecora," said Eindon. "One that I would love to hear more about some day. But tell me, what is the distance between Ciudanath and Edeotor?" "I would say," Piecora began, while scooping another egg bite into her mouth before thinking for several moments. "It's said the entire distance is about 3 weeks, depending on the moods of the wildlands. Could be more, could be less. Ediotor is in the middle, and Ciudanath is between Ediotor and Cienja, so if I were to plan, I'd plan for a week to be safe. Understand, though, the wildlands are ever-changing. Ediotor shifts along with the lands, although it always remains in the middle." "Is Ciudanath affected by the wildlands?" asked Eindon. "No. The wildlands seem to flow around Ciudanath along the edges, like a tide moves around a bulwark. Something there holds the wildlands still." "Do you think that is odd?" asked Eindon, prodding at the edges of Piecora's curiosity. "Well, yes, but why are you suddenly interested in Ediotor and Ciudanath?" asked Piecora, suddenly looking up at Eindon. "Because my newly acquired representative and I have been devising plans and plans within plans," Eindon said, sprawling his fingers mockingly. "It's a bad idea," said Valesh. Ravsez realised she was sulking for some unknown reason. Eindon looked at her and furrowed his brow. "Oh, come on now, Valesh. You came up with it, so it's brilliant, of course. You have the mind and aspect of every Callistico and Harfund Fel who came before you, like they all added an ingredient to the bowl, whisked it up into a batter and gave it life. It's a brilliant idea, and I am all for it." "Please don't," pleaded Valesh, looking up at Eindon with eyes that could melt a mountain. "Those weapons shall not work on me, girl," Eindon said, leaning toward her. "I'm not human, remember." "I mean it," she replied. "I couldn't bear it. Please don't bring it up." "What is everyone talking about?" demanded Piecora. Eindon gathered himself and said, Well, Valesh and I have devised a plan that would certify your safety well into the wildlands and as far as Ciudanath. An expedition has already been in the works for months, actually years come to think of it. My, the time goes by, doesn't it?" "It is not possible to certify or guarantee any safety at all for anyone in the wildlands," said Piecora. "I should know." "But you have never seen an expedition like this one before," said Eindon proudly. "Frankly, I don't know why I didn't think of it myself. Old age setting in, I suppose. It truly is something to look back on one's—" "What are you driving at, lizard?" shouted Piecora. Ravsez jumped from the sudden outburst. "Out with it, and I'll tell you whether I'll even consider it or not." Eindon cleared his throat. "Years ago, I began building a team to cross the wildlands, not to Cienja, but to Ciudanath, to conduct research at Ediotor. I faced significant resistance along the way, especially while trying to find sponsors for the expedition. Sound familiar? Ediotor is considered a heritage site here in Canonaya, and any tampering is deemed illegal. That is why so little is known about the fabled ruin. I finally decided to finance the whole thing myself, but that took time while pulling everything else together. Well, recently we were about ready to launch, but I got hideously intoxicated at the Bishop's Lament the night we met, and I had to take some time to sleep it off, and that leads us to right here and now." A long moment of awkward silence lay in the room until Piecora asked, "So, you want me, and Ravsez, and her son to take part in this expedition?" Eindon snapped his fingers loudly, jolting a drowsy Ravsez awake. "Precisely." "Eindon, please," mourned Valesh. "Let's not do this." "Too late. I can see she's interested already," said Eindon jovially. "Why is your representative so against this?" asked Piecora. Eindon didn't answer. Instead, he looked over at Valesh, and Piecora did the same. Ravsez saw Valesh look up at Autor briefly before she shoved her plate away angrily, kicked herself from the table, and stormed out of the room. "Ah, poor girl," she thought. "I think I know what's wrong with her." "I'll talk to her later," Ravsesi said. "But first, tell us about this expedition. What is it for? How many people are there? And what makes you so assured of our safety? Piecora seems to disagree with that." "Because it's horse shiendi," Piecora said, referring to the Xianjian word for animal excrement. "It's always the overconfident ones who die first in the wildlands." Eindon stood up, flopped his napkin down on his plate with an exuberant gesture, and said, "We will see if you still feel that way tomorrow. It will please you to know that in the morning we will leave this place and finally breathe fresh air again. I'm even sick of it down here. Find a comfortable bed tonight and rest well. This will be your final civilized sleep for a while, my friends." A little while later, Ravses found Valesh sitting by the edge of one of the pools that she and Artor played in, and she sat next to her, removed her boots, and soaked her feet into the warm water. "Valesh," Ravsesi began. "I'm not a child," said Valesh flatly. "It's just silly. Silly and stupid. Stupid." "Why are you opposed to this expedition?" asked Ravsesi quietly, but not too gently. Ravsesi knew that Valesh was much older in her mind and heart than her physical age, so she knew better than to address her as a child. Ravses also knew what the girl was going through, dealing with the expectation or fear that she was losing a friend that she had just grown close with. In fact, Autor might even be her only friend. "I'm not opposed to it. It was my idea," said Valesh. "Valesh, then, are you not coming with us?" Valesh shook her head. "I can't come with you. I need to stay here. The city is my home. I'd lose my mind in the wildlands. The very thought of the wildlands terrifies me." "Eindon thinks the expedition is safe." "Eindon has his head up his arse," said Valesh. "You'll see tomorrow. You'll see what all of this is about tomorrow. It's pretty grand, this plan of his. Been in the works for years. He calls it his sovereignty for some reason. Nothing like it has existed before. He's very excited about it, and there is no diminishing his enthusiasm once he's latched onto something. He considers this his greatest work, and for a dragon as old as he is, that's saying a lot. But I have my doubts. I don't think anyone is safe. I only think you and Artor will be safe, because you'll have Piecora with you." "Valesh, I don't know what you're talking about," said Ravses. "You'll see," said Valesh. "You'll see tomorrow." "Is that what's bothering you then? You're afraid for our safety?" asked Ravsesi. "No, as long as you stay close to Piecora, you'll be fine." "Then what is it?" It felt like the breathtaking stillness before a heavy rain until Valesh whimpered, "I don't want you to leave," as Valesh suddenly threw her arms around Ravsesi and gripped her so tightly that Ravsesi thought her ribs might break, and Valesh sobbed wetly and uncontrollably into her shoulder. Ravsesi held her close, rested her face in the child's dark blonde hair, and rocked her gently back and forth while wondering how long the girl had lived alone, how long since her parents died, and if she had any friends, or anyone at all who she cared about, or if anyone cared about her. Thank you for listening to this chapter from the Book of Urm. If you enjoyed this reading, like and subscribe to our channel, and consider supporting us at the Book of Urm at patreon.com.